Hello, everyone. This is Philip McAllister from NASA. We are about to start the public teleconference for the review of U.S. Human Spaceflight Plans Committee. Just a couple of quick announcements. Members of the public will not be able to use the audio. You'll be in listen-only mode. We have a couple charts on the website that we're going to use to facilitate our discussions. The committee members have these, and if you want to reference them during the call, you can just go to our website, www.hsf.nasa.gov, and under related documents, the two charts, the two files are there. They are also on the meetings page. If you want to click on the meetings page and go to today's meeting, you will see those charts as well. And those are going to guide the discussion. I'll ask that the committee members please identify themselves before they speak so that members of the public know who's speaking. And also, we are going to try and get a recording of this meeting on the website tomorrow, but there will definitely be minutes of today's meeting on the website as well that people can reference. With that, I'll turn it over to the chair, Norm Augustine.
Phil, thank you. This is Norm Augustine. And first of all, let me thank all the members for adjusting your schedule so that you could participate in this. I know that at the moment we're pretty much scattered around the world, and I know it's been inconvenient, but I appreciate it. Let me also welcome the members listening on the public line. We appreciate your interest as well, and as I think you know, the committee's tried hard to carry out our responsibilities as openly as possible, and this session today is in keeping with that objective. I might just mention our complete report is now in the final preparation stage, and it's expected to go to the printer about as soon as we can resolve today's issues and then complete a few editorial items. But the key is to finish today's open item. In the way of background, at the final in-person public meeting that we had in Washington, you'll recall that we rated various individual factors for the integrated options that we offered. Those were factors, I think there were 12 of them. There were things like schedule risks, technology impact, science benefit, and so on. And we did not seek to assign any rankings to the overall integrated options, but rather just to the factors within those options that relate to the benefits and the liabilities of those individual factors. And we did this. We did not rate the overall options because, first of all, we weren't asked to do that. And secondly, because doing it would have required that we apply some kind of judgment as to what the relative weighting should be of each of those factors. And that's beyond the committee's capability. For example, we're not in a position to judge the possibility of adding funds to the various programs. That's beyond our scope. In any event, when we, subsequent to the meeting in Washington, when we did, or I should say, really at the time of the meeting, when we evaluated the individual factors that reflected the strengths and weaknesses of each of those integrated options, you'll recall that we used the program of record as our reference value, and so that all the factors for the other approaches or alternatives were rated according to the extent that they were better than or poorer than the program of record with respect to that specific factor. And as we've completed our work following the meeting in Washington, we've concluded that it was useful to assign descriptors, absolute descriptors, if you will, to the numbers in that relative rating system. And when we did that, we found that we need to transform the program of record into this new descriptor category of ranking. And so it's really a transformation of the earlier numbers of the program of record into this new figure of merit, if you will. And that's the purpose of today's meeting. And I should say, for the benefit of those who are listening on the public line, that Professor Ed Crawley of MIT has been chairing the subcommittee of our group throughout lot of our work that focused on these integrated options and their interpretation. And so he's going to present the transformed ratings for the program of record, at least for the factors that relate to the program of record, I should say. And that will be for the committee's review and any modification that the members as a whole deem are necessary. And then for the approval of the transformed ratings at the end of this call, hopefully. So, Ed, let me turn it to you.
Sure. Thank you, Norm. Just to remind the committee and people listening on the line of the context, the committee developed, principally led by Dr. Austin, an evaluation scheme that had, as Norm mentioned, and the charts which the committee are posted on the website list these. If you turn to the charts that are in the file called evaluation charts, the first one reminds us of the evaluation measures that are more or less associated with benefit: exploration, preparation, science, technology, innovation, science, expanding human civilization, public engagement, economic expansion, and global partnership. And on these charts, it shows the criteria, and a new feature of the chart is the traceability of these criteria to various other reference documents. And on the second chart, likewise, it shows the 5, you might call them programmatic evaluation measures of schedule, mission, profile, safety, workforce, programmatic sustainability, and life cycle costs. And let me just point out to remind people that the mission profile safety challenge is the safety challenges associated with executing the mission profile, and not a reflection on the specific vehicle or system that we have in that profile, for example, by the definition of our criteria. And likewise, workforce on chart 2 implies both critical skills and overall workforce impact. Those 2 points will become relevant in a few minutes. So if you look at charts 3 and 4 of the summary evaluation criteria, or the evaluation charts, you find the rubrics, which here show red, yellow, white, green, blue. In the meeting on the 12th, we actually used -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, red being -2 and blue being +2, to symbolize the level of associated with the rubric. And there are, as you can see on charts 3 and 4, 12 rubrics that were developed and specialized to each of the 12 evaluation criteria. When we met on the 12th, we had all of this information in front of us, and we used this as a basis of the debate that we had over the course of several hours when we deliberated on the rankings that were to be assigned in each of these categories to the individual options. So that's the background. If you go to the chart, to the Excel spreadsheet.
Hey, Ed, excuse me, this is Phil. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for clarity, the first 2 charts that Ed is referencing, the added area under traceability, what he has referenced there is the 1958 NASA Space Act or Space Act. VSE stands for Vision for Space Exploration in 2005. GES is Global Exploration Strategy in 2007. That was the document that NASA and the international community developed in 2007. And then I believe, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, the OSTP 2009 referred to the Statement of Task criteria that we received?
That's correct.
Okay. Just wanted to add that for clarification. Sorry, Ed. Go ahead.
Okay. So if we turn to the scoring update _2009 October 8 file, we see here the part of the grid that we did not fill in on August 12th. I'm sorry. Now, and it was for several reasons, and I'll start up in the upper right-hand corner with columns N, O, and T on the spreadsheet for the information of the committee. There were three criteria which on that date we set an algorithmic approach to by agreement during the discussion on the committee, and chartered the subgroup of us who continued to go on and work on this, and particularly to work on the aerospace affordability analysis refinement, to fill in once the results of the affordability analysis became completely refined. So these categories of science knowledge, schedule, and life cycle costs were left by agreement of the committee to be filled in by the subgroup based on the algorithm that we agreed to at the meeting, essentially. And so I'm presenting these to the committee more or less as information. The algorithm for science knowledge was, if in the interval under consideration, which extended to 2020, a scenario reached the moon, it was given an increment up from 0 of 1, and if in the interval it reached a NEO or other planet, it was given an additional increment up of 1. And you can see there that the options 3, 4A, and 4B, which are lunar strategies, therefore scored a 1, and the option 5 variant scored a 2, as they actually did achieve, as was reported in our summary report, visiting both NEOs and the lunar surface within the decade of the 20s. The schedule algorithm was basically interpreted as when the first significant accomplishment beyond LEO occurred, and the 0 ranking was about the middle of the 20s. And it turns out that the options 3 and 4 accomplished that according to the affordability analysis. The flexible path options get out of significant exploration activity out of LEO a few years earlier, and therefore get a 1. And the options 1 and 2, the constrained to the FY10 budget, never achieved in the interval under consideration out to 2030 significant exploration beyond LEO. So that explained, and therefore get a -2. The life cycle cost used the program of record as a reference, and essentially, since the schedule reflected the development cost, the schedule to initial capability reflected the development cost within a constrained budget, the life cycle cost was used to actually measure an indication of the expected recurring cost, again, with the program of record being equal to a 0. And if the option included commercial crew, it was incremented up 1 because of the expected lower recurring costs of the commercial crew launch to the system to LEO. If it used the EELV heavy, that is option 5B, it was incremented up an additional 1. And if it used a shuttle-derived heavy, it was incremented down 1 because one of the outputs of the aerospace affordability analysis indicated the relatively higher recurring operating costs for a fixed mass to launch to LEO of shuttle-derived based system. So the numbers in the life cycle cost column are essentially just starting at 0 and incrementing up or down 1 based on those life cycle or recurring cost considerations. Next to those in columns K, L, and M is a slightly different adjustment that Dr. Ride and I made in interpreting these and preparing the evaluation chapter. As I pointed out when I was referring to the green and green charts a few minutes ago, the evaluation measure charts, we at the workforce valuation metric actually encompasses 2 factors. One is number of workforce, essentially, and the second is national skills, preservation of important national skills. And at the at the public meeting on the 12th of August, we scored these as individual factors. But then after the meeting, we went back and upon examining how we had defined the 12 metrics, realized that these were really two parts of what we call here the composite workforce skills metric. And here, all we did was to take the sum of the column which was industry workforce and the one that was national skills to produce the composite. So that as you can see, it received a -1 and a -1, it moved to a -2, and so on. The rationale behind these was that the constrained options, because of the significantly lower budget level, would cause more disruption in the workforce, and the only option which we identified that would not have some negative effect on the preservation of national skills was option 4B, in which the continuation of the shuttle through about 2015 made a significant contribution to preserving the national skills associated with human spaceflight launch. So there's two slightly different categories here. In the science, knowledge, schedule, and life cycle costs, this is just reporting to the committee how the subgroup working on this applied the algorithms which we agreed to in the public meeting on the 12th. And in the workforce ones, it's just reporting that after we went back after the meeting, we realized that there was one metric for workforce in the system, so we combined the two that we had assigned at the day of the meeting to yield that one metric for workforce. So Norm,
this is Bob Baymag. I have a question.
Yeah.
Did we, since we discussed this last time, change the factors we are applying to cost to go for programs and went through PDR? That's the impression I got from your write-up in the final report.
No, Bo, there has been no change in the assumptions associated with the affordability analysis.
So we are still using on cost to go, whether it went through PDR or did not, we are using 1.51 factor.
No,
depending on. Go ahead.
For the DDT&E, 1.51. Is that correct?
No, that's not right, Bo. We're using the 1.51 in the aerospace affordability analysis from the costs which were reported by the programs at the time of PDR. So that if programs have refined their cost, as some have since PDR, then the cost to go applied is less than 1.5.
And it's for DDT&E only for that factor.
For DDT&E, right. So there has been no change in the evaluation system. It's what it always was, that is to say, what it has been over the last few months, which is that the costs for DDT&E from the reported costs of the program at the time of PDR are the basis of the evaluation. So that, for example, if a program had a program element had a PDR a year ago, and in the subsequent year it revised its cost upward, then as several have, then the 1.5 was applied to the cost at PDR, not the cost currently carried by the program, and it is applied on cost to go.
Okay, thank you.
Ed, this is Chris Chiba.
Yep.
I'd like to suggest to the committee that we consider what I think is a minor modification, but one I'd like to be explicit about, to the what you call the algorithm we agreed to use in science evaluation, science knowledge evaluation. And the reason I suggest that is because I think while field geology is a premier area where astronauts can greatly contribute to the advancement of science, and the committee certainly heard testimony from that was clear. Another area that I think it should be captured is the ability to service science observatories in space. And I would suggest that our criterion for science then be expanded to read something like, if the integrated option reaches neither the moon nor a near-Earth object, nor provides capability to service science observatories in space, then it gets a 0. If it does one of those things, it gets a 1. If it does any two of them, it gets a 2. With that algorithm, in fact, our numbers don't change. I would, alert the committee if I thought the numbers needed to change. They don't under that algorithm. But I think that we need to capture the ability to service science observatories in space, especially since the presentation from the astrophysics decadal survey representative, and I realize that no one was formally representing the decadal surveys, but that presentation did specifically call out the ability to service major science observatories.
Chris, thank you. This is Norm. That makes a great deal of sense to me. Does anybody have a problem with that?
I don't, Norm. This is Wanda Austin, and I think that's a good way to recognize the additional value there, even if you're not able to go to one of the destinations. So I think that's good.
Well, this is Wanda. It was your group that put this together. Does anybody else have a problem of any kind? Not hearing one, Ed. Why don't you go ahead? Oh, excuse me. I heard somebody try to say something.
Oh, Charlie here. I just think that's an important clarification.
Terrific. Okay. Ed, back to you.
Okay. Now we'll move down to the lower part of the chart, which is actually more the reason why we convened today. When we examined the results of our late afternoon August 12th discussion at the end of the day or the next day, it became apparent that we had actually not formally scored the baseline program. And this sort of didn't surprise us, or it didn't disturb us, in the sense that I think both Wanda and I, in the course of helping construct the rubrics by which we scored the different options, the different integrated options in these 12 categories, had a mental model that the baseline program was sort of the reference value and would get a 0 in all of the categories, and things, as Norm described at the beginning of the call, would be incremented up or down from 0 for the other options, leaving the baseline more or less as a set of zeros.
And Ed, I'm sorry, this is Phil again. The baseline option is option 3.
Is option 3, yes, that's right. Thank you. In fact, we made an attempt to specifically construct the rubrics using the baseline as the reference, as Norm said. Now, only in the sort of final drafting of the report over the last few weeks did it become obvious that if we actually used just a set of zeros across the board for the 12 criteria for the baseline, that in fact that would not be a consistent scoring system with the others, the other integrated options, because of the evolution of the scoring that occurred during our discussion at the meeting on the 12th. So in the lower, now 3 of these categories essentially are already taken care of, because up in the upper right-hand corner of the chart, you notice that the science knowledge, the schedule, and the life cycle costs for the program for the baseline option 3 actually have been filled in by the algorithm that we agreed. So it's really the remaining 9 that we should have discussed at the meeting on the. Let me just run quickly through the 6 of them with which there really is no conflict. In exploration preparation, in fact, we did use the Ares 1 plus Ares 5 so-called 1.5 launch scenario as the reference case around which we incremented the others up or down based on capability. So a 0 is appropriate there. In the next column in technology, this was almost completely driven by the presence or absence of the technology investment wedge, where no technology investment wedge was defined as a zero, so that's consistently a zero. In the human civilization, there was a little bit more texture if the option, but again, the baseline was the right reference. As we actually scored them, if we succeeded in reaching either the moon or a near-Earth object, we incremented it up one. And if there was no ISS extension because of the human physiology and research capability, ISS extension, we decremented it back down one, which for the program of record would produce, again, a zero. For economic expansion, we incremented it up if there was either commercial crew or other commercially provided services, and the reference being zero, which is appropriate to the baseline. I'll skip the global partnership. For public engagement, the trips to the exploration of the moon, which is the plan of the baseline program, were the reference base, and we left that as a zero. Skipping safety, sustainability, we actually incremented up if the shuttle was extended, and we incremented down if there was the disruption associated with the changeover to the ELV heritage heavy. But again, the baseline has neither of those, so stays at a zero. And the NASA and industry workforce, we basically left at a zero for all of the options other than the ones in the constrained FY10 budget. So for those 9 categories, the assignment of a zero is perfectly reasonable and consistent with all the other scores we assigned on that day of our last public meeting. Why don't I stop there and just ask if there is any questions about that part before we get to the other 3?
Yeah. Hey, Ed, is safety in your 9?
No, safety is one of the ones we're about to discuss.
Okay, very good. I'll wait.
Ed, I had this norm one on the skills. You had 2 minus 1s, and you added them together and got a minus 2. What if you'd had 2 minus 2s? You would have been off our scale, or would you just have given that a minus 2?
I would have come up with a different answer. It just happens that, by happenstance, adding them together stayed on our scale norm.
So you just would have stacked it up. You would have had different degrees of bad.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
But as I said, that didn't happen. So now let me turn to the global partnerships. The rubric assigned for zero in the global partnerships was sustained existing international partners, whereas the minus 2 rubric discourages further international partner involvement. And in the course of our deliberations on the 12th of August, we decided that the failure to extend the ISS past 2015 for one of the options we scored, which was option 1, the program of record within the constrained case, constituted, according to our definition of the rubrics, enough of a source of discouragement of further international partnerships that we assigned it a minus 2. And in view of the fact that the baseline also does not extend the ISS past 2015, it seemed inappropriate to assign it a 0. So therefore, I would propose that we move the score for global partnerships from 0 to minus 2, which makes it consistent with the other option, which did not extend the ISS, option 1, and leaves as a 0 all the other options, that is, the options 2, 4 in its variance, and 5 in its variance, which were scored by us as a 0.
Does anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would support that. In our discussions with various heads of agencies that participated, not all, but some of the ones that participated in the ISS, they to a person urged that we continue the ISS to 2020.
I'm
fine with that change.
Yeah.
I'm good too. Does anybody have a problem with that? Okay, Ed, let's go to the next one of your three.
Okay. In the next category is mission safety profile. Now, the full rubric is called Mission Profile Safety Challenge, and in this case, the rubric is fairly clear that a 0 is a LEO mission, that a -1 is a NEO or Lagrange flyby or lunar landing, and then there's an additional mission complexity factor that we factored into several of the profiles that were associated with more complex on-orbit mission operation. However, so therefore the assignment of a 0 to the baseline, which does go to the moon, is inconsistent with the rubric, that the consistent rating should actually be a -1, which would cause it to have, for example, the same rating as the one right below it on the chart, option 4A, moon first using the Ares, but with other changes in the program. So I would recommend that we move that mission safety profile ranking to be consistent with all the other options that went to the moon, being a -1.
Does anybody want to comment on that?
Yes, this is Bo Bamag. I do. I feel that option 3, especially for LEO axis, would enjoy higher safety than, and I like all these other options just as well, but Ares 1 is a simpler vehicle and the mission is a simpler mission, and I would suggest that the safety aspect should be rated higher than some of the other options. And it's both for LEO axis and lunar mission. It's just fewer vehicles and fewer engines to deal with, and also simplicity of the mission. So I would suggest that we rate it higher than, I'd say, +1.
Well, this is Jeff Grayson. I think that's quite inconsistent, and I would support Ed's original proposal that we rank them all according to the rubric.
Yeah, Wanda, you
go ahead, Bo.
No, I was saying the Wanda did actually a lot of thinking about how to apply this safety rubric, and maybe we should hear a few words from her.
Thanks, Ed. I think that part of the challenge we have is for vehicles that have not flown. Trying to make a safety assessment is, I think, in the area of risk, probably a difficult thing for us to do. The approach that we took on the safety measure was to really look at the mission profile as opposed to the individual vehicles. Clearly, as you fly more missions, the reliability of the vehicle and the safety of the vehicle will be established over time, whichever vehicle you choose. So the concept here was one that was really focused more on the mission profile. So two vehicles flying the same mission profile, Bo, would get the same rating. It's not, it's not a indictment of the Ares vehicle. It's more looking at the safety of the mission profile as it's being portrayed.
Yeah, this is Bo Bamag again. I'm still suggesting that it says LEO is whatever we do is a single launch vehicle, and Ares 1 is about as simple as you can get. You have a single engine in the first stage, single engine on the second stage. when you talk about Aries 1 light or some of the other options, we have more propulsion, more bodies tied together. And when you talk to lunar mission, the minimum is 2 vehicles involved. And again, you're looking at, so that's not a discriminator. So then you look at the vehicles, and again, Aries 1 should score a little bit higher than, for example, Aries 5 light or any of the other vehicles that have multiple engines and multiple bodies carrying people.
But Bo, the basis of the scoring of -1 is actually dominated by the fact that you have to land on the moon. The rubric is associated with the fact that it's a lunar landing that causes it to get a -1, and it really doesn't have, it's not dominated by the consideration of launch to Leo. So
why shouldn't launch to Leo be a discriminator if it's safer than any of the other vehicles in executing a mission?
I think the problem we're having is that the parameters that we've defined are really ratings of the missions. Bo, I think you're talking about the ratings of individual vehicles. I think we need to separate that. My view of how we might resolve this is, first of all, I think it's very important we be consistent with how we've rated everything else. And I think we ought to do that, which is to pick up Ed's recommendation, but to include in the text the point you make, if it isn't already made, which it is to a degree, but we could certainly emphasize it, Bo, with regard to the individual vehicles.
Yeah, let me only add, this is Jeff Grayson again, that, we spent a lot of time going over attempting to distinguish the safety of various unbuilt vehicles. And, while the factors that you're discussing are very real, though, it was very much not obvious when you looked at the real failure history of real vehicles and how that is not dominated by the kinds of factors in probabilistic risk assessment that compared to mission profile-related risks, that those dominated loss of mission issues.
Well, it's all very nice, except to me, mission is what you do and what tools do you use to execute it. And one of the tools is a launch vehicle. And I'm having a problem sweeping aside what is to me. And by the way, I discussed it with Sally just this morning. She wasn't able to be on this telecon, and we both agreed that participation of a simple rocket in executing a mission should be a positive from point of view of mission safety. And I'm not sure our grading system recognizes that. At least right now it doesn't. But mission
Ed, do you want to comment?
There are participation of several different types of simpler rockets. And as Wanda said, that is the challenge that we face. And the criteria for this category is pretty clearly defined as the safety risks associated with the mission and not the safety risks associated with the vehicle. The rubrics are suborbital missions, LEO orbital ascent and entry missions, LEO missions that include rendezvous and docking, MEO and lunar landing missions, and beyond lunar landing and or complex operation. They're all tied to the mission profile.
Well, if given that what we're rating as missions here, can you accept what's been described in terms of what vehicle comparisons? I think that's a separate issue. You make a good point, a very good point, I think, but it's separate. Juan, am I right that you put the ratings together?
You're correct, Norm. I think that the way that we've separated it is a way that we can look across all of the options and compare them fairly. This again gets into the, your rocket versus, somebody else's view graphs. So I think that our going in position was that it had to be a safe and reliable vehicle from our assessment in order to be considered as an option. And then the distinguishing factor here was the mission profile in terms of how it would be used.
Yeah, well, I wonder, this is Bo Baymack again. Of course, the mission profile is a big driver, but it's also the hardware you're using in that mission. And it seems like, that you have a simple rocket that has a lot of heritage hardware. When you talk about this, my rocket versus your view graphs, this is about as much rocket as any of these or more. And it's simple. It's simpler. And I have a little problem conceding that that should not count in executing of a mission.
We would quickly find, were we to go down that road and recapitulate 3 months of work, that simple is somewhat in the eye of the beholder, and different partisans of different systems all have good arguments for why their system uniquely should be exempt from the lessons of history about things other than probabilistic risks dominating. But that's simply not a conclusion that we reached, in my opinion.
We would also find that...
Go ahead, Bo.
No, someone else. Go ahead.
I'm going to say we would also find that the risks of going to the moon and back are not dominated by the ascent risks.
Yes, I agree. Ascent, however, is a component of risk. You got to get past LEO access, and that defines in some finite measure to the risk of the mission, and then, of course, beyond LEO is another whole field of risks. But it seems to me that program of record has a simpler rocket than almost any other rocket, and we are not giving it credit.
Oh, I completely disagree with that assessment, just in passing, but I will not debate the topic further.
This is Chris Chiba. Just like to summarize for what I've concluded from what I've just been listening to. It seems to me that a critical point here is the claim, which we say in the report in text, that I think the number we cite is 90% of historical accidents are not captured by probabilistic risk assessment. And if that's right, then once you have a mature system that you hope is captured by a PRA, then the kind of comparisons, Bo, you're suggesting would be perhaps dominant. But if if there's an order of magnitude difference between that PRA assessment and what actually in reality is responsible for most accidents, then it seems to me that the differences you're citing are not going to dominate, and something like mission profile, to the extent that this can be captured, rationally at all, given the unknowns, mission profile seems likely to dominate. That's what I'm taking from this discussion, but others can correct me if I've summarized that incorrectly.
So, Chris, you're saying that even though you might agree that there is some incremental value of the simpler rocket in the scope of the whole risks to a mission profile, that's a small factor. I guess that's what I hear you express.
Well, I think that we say in the report that that's the lesson of history with respect to actual accidents.
Well, look, to try to resolve this, I don't want to force something here that people aren't comfortable with, but it does seem to me we're talking about two different things, and I think that in terms of evaluating the mission complexity or difficulty or challenge from a risk standpoint, Ed, I think your number is consistent with what we've rated everything else, and so it has that important attribute. I think you've raised a separate question that's not unimportant in my mind, but I don't think it affects this factor. I think that that's a discussion point to be dealt with in the report. I don't know, Bo, could you accept that, or where are we?
Ed, how can we reflect it in the report?
Well, we can, in the discussion of the launch vehicle...
I would proceed to this rating that the mission rating would not be affected by what I'm arguing as far as safety of Ares 1 rocket. Can we reflect it somehow in the report, and I can live with that?
I think there's a section, though, in the launch of Crew to Leo chapter, or a chapter in a part in the section on Crew to Leo where we could reflect that concern.
I'm fine. I can live with that.
And I wouldn't mind a sentence talking about how generically there's a category that has more than one rocket in it, that, single stick vehicles with single engines per stick are generally a better way to go. But there's more than one rocket in that category.
See, even Jeff and I found agreement.
Okay. Is there anybody that's unacceptable to?
That's perfectly acceptable to me, Norm. This is Wanda.
Terrific. Well, why don't we proceed on that basis? Incidentally, we took a roll here before we went on the public line. I think we have a quorum here for those who might be wondering that. Why don't we go with this, and I'll summarize at the end here the action items that came out of that.
Thank you.
Ed, do you want to pick up the third item then?
Sure. The third and last one is that under the column of national skills, and this is not total number of people either in NASA or the